Recording. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome. This is Dee. This is Catalyst Energies. This is the astrological report for the first quarter square of the sun and the moon. As you can see, as I've displayed here, is a crisis of action. It is the first square between the sun and the moon after the beginning of the new moon. So the beginning of the lunar cycle. So we are looking at tomorrow, 1:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. There are other transits happening today, and this report is going to encompass this particular aspect, which is happening tomorrow, and then also through the weekend, and what to expect as we go through this tense moment of conflict, and how we then get to emotionally make sense of it, how we are organizing our feelings, and how our emotional landscape, right, with the moon moving through Virgo. And then when we get to Monday, the moon will have moved into Libra, and at that point we're talking about some different aspects that are coming up, and specifically do a Beltane report. So one of the things I want to say about Beltane real quick is that it's often celebrated on May 1st. But if you look at it from a seasonal cycle and not the Gregorian calendar, Beltane is when the sun is halfway through Taurus. So that would be 15 degrees Taurus, which actually is happening on the 4th or 5th. So might as well just drag out your Beltane for a whole week. I think that sounds awesome, actually. But I will be doing a Beltane inspired video for Monday to go through that particular energy as well. So, but today we're going to be talking about this first quarter square, the sun in Taurus, the moon in Leo, the other transits that are happening on the same day, and then looking at the weekend and seeing how this is all going to shake out. So I left this up so you can, take down some information if that's helpful for you. Take a screenshot, whatever you need to do. What is a first quarter square? It is, well, the first square between the sun and the moon since the new moon. So crisis of action, this is the first time the moon has come into a position relative to the sun where it is squaring it. And what does that mean? That means there are trajectories that are going in different directions, and they often they'll create a square like this, a 90-degree angle. And this is a point of tension and a point of incredible learning, an opportunity for growth if we are able to see that for what it is. They are not easy connections. This is why it's called a crisis of action, because this is the first time that emotionally we have to deal with the conflict that comes from our emotional trajectory now being different than where the sun still is, which is the sign that the new moon was originally in. So at least in this situation. So Taurus and Leo, we're going to talk about that. That's fixed air, that's fixed earth. Mercury is now in Taurus and is going to conjunct Uranus in Taurus on the same day. This is an incredible moment of incredibly intense information coming in. This is like serious download time. And then the moon in Leo will trine Chiron. Also, it's going to she's going to square Mercury and Uranus back to back, because they are going to be lined up with each other. And then it's going to square the sun. The conjunction with Mercury and Uranus is happening at the end of the day on Thursday. And then as we move into the weekend, we have our moon in Virgo and making nice trines to all of the stuff that it just squared in Taurus. So Virgo is very meticulous and detail-oriented and is able to put things and organize things appropriately. It is a lot of work, whereas Taurus is very stable, but it's also very still. It's a lot of the essence of just being and holding space. Virgo is very active, even though it's an earth sign and it's all under the surface. There's all these catalytic reactions. The roots are taking up minerals from the soil. There's a lot going on in the plant during the Virgo season, and it's all under the surface, but it's very active, it's very meticulous, and it's very organized, and it's about purification and making sure everything is where it needs to be. So over the weekend, you can really feel the Leo moon. I feel it really building. And when we look at the chart, we'll talk about the Leo archetype and what it is bringing up in us, because now we're at a point of passion and arousal and a creativity. It's the blood rushing to the head. It is the heart pumping. That is Leo. Leo is also the lion. So we're talking about royalty. We're talking about sovereignty. We're talking about full expression. The sun rules Leo. And so you find this square with the sun that would rather be in Leo, to be perfectly honest, because that's the energy that most relates to what the sun represents to us. The sun is the center of everything for us. It gives us everything. And so the Leo energy is the center of ourselves, and it's really our hearts, right? And so there's a lot of arousal. I can already feel it. So it depends on what area of your chart this is happening in. If you're in Aquarius rising, chances are it's Leo moon in your 7th house, how you're interacting with other people. I can really feel it, the way that I'm engaging other people, the types of conversations, the tone of conversations. It gets very fiery, and it gets very like, Leo is just the center stage, that's just all there is to it. And it's all about full expression. So let's go to the chart for, let's see here, where are we? So I hope you got some of that information. I can go back to it if you want. You can always just go back and look at the screen if you need to. So this is right now. This is actually not right this second. This was at 4:20 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So you can see the moon is getting very, very close to Leo now. It's in the last degree of Cancer. And today has been an interesting day where a lot of our emotional vulnerabilities may have started to become obvious, in the container that we find our emotional stability in may have started to crack a little bit, or at least show us where we need to reinforce that vessel. And perhaps we're not even in a vessel. Maybe this is understanding how the natural world is actually completely set up to hold us emotionally. And this is, this is really where we stabilize ourselves, is with the earth herself. But regardless of where you emotionally stabilize yourself, it's certainly been challenged today with oppositions, the moon having oppositions to Pluto and to Jupiter in Capricorn, and very, very soon is going to have an opposition to Saturn in Aquarius. So it's not over just because I'm making this video for tomorrow. I'm curious to see how tomorrow really starts to shake out as today ends. It's still pretty early when it comes to how many things can happen in the course of a couple hours. So moon is almost in Leo. So let's talk about this square. The moon will be at 11 degrees Leo, and it will be square to the sun in Taurus, right before 11 degrees. We're talking about 10 degrees, 56 minutes. Okay, so let's look at that, because today I went over quite a bit in the write-up on Facebook. So let's look at the actual time here for, there we go. That's close enough. Here's the square right here. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that it's also, the moon is going to square, look at this, is also going to square Mercury and Uranus, who are conjunct today. So I talked a lot about in other stuff, the 7 degrees of Taurus archetype for the Sabian symbol, which is the Good Samaritan at the ancestral well. I'm not going to tell the story over and over again, but what I am going to say is that basically it boils down to being able to embrace the new age, being able to embrace in some ways the chaos and accept it with love and see it as just as part of the whole as you are. And I actually had this really awesome revelation the other day about this particular story, because it is, we are coming into the Aquarian age, and Jesus, who's a big part of the story of the Good Samaritan, he's coming from the Piscean age, and he comes to this area of the well, and he meets with this woman who's kind of an outcast because she doesn't really follow the rules of the culture, and so she's already an outcast from her own society. That's a very Aquarian thing, by the way, is to be humanitarian. She's humanitarian enough that she's coming to the well to get the water, and she gives Jesus the water, even though they're supposed to be like political enemies. They're two factions. That's also a very Aquarian thing, the water bearer, right? And Jesus comes along and she offers the water anyway, because she's more interested in the larger context of humanity, as opposed to, I'm gonna not help you because you're in a different faction of humanity than I am. Very Aquarian, right? And then Jesus comes along, this interchange happens, and what does he do? He actually reveals himself as God to this woman, which he has not done with anybody else, his disciples or anybody. They've had to kind of figure it out through his stories and his narratives and his allegories. But God reveals himself directly to this woman. And it dawned on me that in some ways the story is about the transition from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age, because he passes on the knowledge of God to this woman who is essentially fulfilling the Aquarian archetype. I just thought it was really a really helpful mental construct in terms of looking at this particular symbol and how important it is right now, because this is where Uranus is, and it's been here for a while and will continue to be here for a little bit longer. But when you have, and Uranus is very large awakenings. It's the collective third eye. So not everybody is able to really understand that collective experience personally in their own minds, because sometimes it's just, it's just too outside of the realm of what can be understood, because you have to think outside of the box with Aquarius, and Uranus rules Aquarius. When Mercury comes to conjunct Uranus right after this square happens, this is a huge revelation moment. It is like the download from the great third eye of the collective. Everybody's going to get the message somehow in some way, and it's going to be up to us whether or not we reject the chaos, we reject what seemingly seems to be different than us, instead of accepting the chaos, accepting what seems to be opposite us in our realization that it's all the same, right? That's going to be the challenge with this conjunction. The square is going to certainly, the square between the sun and the moon, we're talking about our external expression of our consciousness, and then the moon is our internal landscape, how we feel. This square here, this is, early Leo is not exactly very stable. It is a rebirth, but it's very immature in the sense that we're kind of like swinging back and forth in terms of what how we engage spiritually. We're kind of all over the place, again, blood rushing to the head. It's not clear thinking. It's all heart and passion and vibrancy at this point. And so with the moon here, it's really like we're really kind of like swinging around and like all over the place, because we feel so inspired by it. And the square to the moon, to the sun, is just like, yeah, we're still in Taurus though. Remember the new moon. Remember the commitment we're making to get deeper into ourselves. This is going to be a big part of how we take this conjunction with Mercury and Uranus, because the moon's going to square both of these places. It's going to come along and square both of them back to back. And so emotionally, with this Leo energy, that we're getting all fired up, we're getting all inspired, we're getting all emotionally aroused about things, it's going to square both of these places. That's just like, are you going to accept the chaos and accept what seems to not be part of your group and see things from a more humanitarian perspective? Or are you going to reject what appears to be, again, the moon is going to challenge this idea of this basic spiritual value that we have, and the common humanity. Because it's really, it's not going to seem that way at first, because the common humanity at this stage is meant to look like us, or be something that we're familiar and comfortable with. And this is something where Uranus, 7 degrees of Taurus, it's not something we're familiar or comfortable with. Most people weren't. They would have rejected Jesus at the well, except for this woman who was already an outcast, very Aquarian, not following the rules, much more interested in helping this person because they're a person. So it's going to be really easy to get really fired up this week, especially with this square. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And it's really, we got to come back into our center, right? This is the sun in Taurus. It is us being still. It is us being the soil, being the medium from which something will grow. And with the trine also to Chiron and Aries, Wow. This degree is, wow, is it's it's we're getting to this point again. Like I said, it's kind of immature, and it's not a bad thing. It's just early in the development of like this sovereignty, emotionally, and we're gonna start wanting to speak out, wanting to spread the revolutionary ideals, right? Emotionally. And Chiron and Aries right now, it's going to totally support this. It's going to totally support where we're at in terms of this victim savior mentality, that we're feeling about ourselves, about the subjective I. That's what we're all dealing with, this self-worth on the deepest level. And are we a victim? Are we here to save people? What is our identity? And with this moon in early Leo, it could really help resolve this by being willing to communicate your revolutionary ideals, or it will aggravate the fact that there is definitively victims and definitively saviors. I hope that makes sense. It's all about how you use this stuff. It's just going to be very explosive, not even explosive, just very passionate and very fired up. And at the same time, there's a lot of things that are, especially the Taurus, the sun in Taurus, and Mercury in Taurus and Uranus in Taurus. It's just like, there are patterns, natural patterns unfolding here, and part of it is whether or not you're going to accept them as opposed to doing anything about them, and aligning with them. So that's tomorrow. That's just tomorrow, this incredible energy. So I would be, you can already feel it building, and by tomorrow I think it's going to reach a pinnacle, and we're going to be put in this position where we get to actively choose what kind of action we're going to take with everything that we're feeling and seeing and experiencing, and the downloads of information are going to be substantial. It's going to be a real opportunity. We're going to see the real crisis in action, literally, and we're going to be like, what do I do with this information? So that's the rest of the weekend. So here's May Day, which is Saturday. It's all moon stuff, and so the moon has moved into, is just trucking along in Leo, right? And then is going to move into Virgo. At this point, the moon then is going to trine all of the Taurus energies. So it's going to be balanced with the sun and Taurus. It's going to be balanced with Mercury and Taurus. It's going to be balanced with Uranus and Taurus. And it's certainly not going to, and then it's going to have weird inconjunct energies with Chiron. And so what we've gotten out of the square, the first quarter square, now that we're moving into the second quarter of the lunar cycle, the moon in Virgo, which I said earlier is meticulous, detail oriented, very interested in all of the processes under the surface, the actual nuts and bolts, the work of the uptake of minerals from the soil, for instance. That's in order to support the seed, that is the fruit that is bearing the seed. Once you get to Virgo in the growing cycle, this is the time of year where the plant is not focused on blooming a flower. That's already happened. Pollination has happened, and now it's time to grow the fruit that bears the seed, right? And so what this Taurus energy, it's going to be very well supporting how we feel about this, and how we feel about it if we're willing to organize and use it and be active in the process. It'll very much be foundational with all of this Taurus energy, showing us the natural progression of what is unfolding, as opposed to like feeling like we have to do anything. Now, depending on what comes up for you, this time might not be easy. I mean, my 8th house is Virgo, right? It could be some interesting things that you're exploring and that you are being very meticulous about and detail oriented about. And so, but it's really about organizing yourself emotionally based on everything you've learned with the squares to this energy. Now the moon is helping you find a connection, a balanced connection with all of this. And then this is Saturday, right? Also an opposition, moon opposition to Mars, sorry, a moon opposition to Mars as well, you know, just moving past, and I'm like, where is this on my, oh, we're looking at Friday. Oh my God, I fucked that up. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry. We're looking at Friday. We're looking at Friday. The moon opposing. So no, we haven't gotten into Virgo yet. Oh my God, don't listen to me yet. Let's backtrack just a tiny bit. The moon is not going into Virgo yet because we've skipped an entire day. So the moon is in Leo. It is going to oppose Mars in Aquarius. Okay, so when you get into late Leo, you've really started to master this energy. You're feeling really powerful. You're feeling your skills are very, very high, very sensitive. You've the rebirth, the blood is pumping and the heart is pumping, and it allows you to actually do some amazing things at this point. It's in opposition to Mars and Aquarius that is just completely focused on the collective, completely focused on the humanitarian aspects of things, and is certainly would rather be in a fire sign, but is over here in Aquarius being like, no, we have to focus on the collective. We have to focus on the best for everybody, and it's just charging forward in that way. And again, oppositions are finding the fulcrum. Where's our balance between that and also like totally mastering our skills, totally mastering our sovereignty, like coming into the fullness of it. This is where Friday, this is the first. This is where we're going to need to find our balance, because if we're focused on just one or the other, it's not balanced. And this is what we need, is to find in the middle here. That is Friday. That's the big one. So Saturday, the 2nd, there we go. Now the moon is in Virgo. So all of that stuff still applies. The trines, right? The trines to all of the Taurus energy as well. The Sun and Mercury and Uranus, it is going to quincunx. You see that here in conjunct with Chiron and Aries. So once we get to this point where we're just like very meticulously analyzing everything emotionally, it's not really going to line up with what happened when it was trine with Chiron when it was in Leo. That's a different feeling entirely now. We are very much more interested in the nuts and bolts of things, as opposed to getting, you know, really caught up into the heart pumping, you know, blood rushing, arousal aspect of Leo, you know. That's what you need to kind of go into battle in some ways. So this is Saturday. It's moon in Virgo all day. It's going to be a lot of internalized restructuring emotionally, and being very willing to look at the details as well. So now we get to Sunday. The moon is going to be in Virgo pretty much all day, and will, by the end of the day, like midnight-ish, is going to move into Libra. The big news for Sunday is, so the moon then will have opposed Neptune in Pisces. You know, this is about being hopeful and trusting, being hopeful. You might be naive, but there's something to hope for, a future. It's here. And Neptune being here, it's so powerful, and it's not going to be really clear. In fact, it's like almost intentionally foggy, because you have to like practice trusting it. But there is a hope here. And so with the moon in Virgo opposed it, again, we have another fulcrum that we have to balance here. The moon in late Virgo is getting really serious about itself, and about what it's able to accomplish, what it's analyzed, what it feels like it's figured out at this point. And opposed to, and it's really about the training. Like, we're going to get to this point in late Virgo where it's like, okay, we have to actually physically train ourselves. We actually have to physically do the things. And this is where we're going to want to start like actually bringing things into form. And the opposition to this Neptune and Pisces is really going to pull us back into, okay, well, there's still something to be trusted about what's happening. It's not all lost, and we don't have to like train for the battle necessarily. Not to say that we shouldn't train ourselves and get ourselves situated, but this, again, the balance point right here. for Sunday with this moon oppose Neptune. And then again, it's in an earth sign, so it's going to trine all of this Capricorn energy too. And so we may have this opposition with feeling like, is there really any hope? We have to get ourselves situated. But whatever happen is, while we're mastering ourselves in late Virgo, it's very much balanced with where Pluto and Jupiter are in Capricorn. Absolutely. And so in some ways, it's supporting this transition period that is being symbolized by Pluto and by Jupiter. Jupiter is continuing to move up the mountain. At this point, is moved on to an even higher spiritual perspective, Jupiter, and then Pluto is now moving retrograde. So regardless of what this is for you in particular, the moon in late Virgo, we are mastering ourselves. And in this case with the moon, it's emotionally. We're emotionally mastering ourselves. And it's very much supported by these big, massive changes in Capricorn. The big news, though, Sunday, is that Venus is going to be square Neptune as well. So not only is the moon going to oppose Neptune, and we have that attention to Neptune there, then you have Venus in Gemini. It's going to square this position. You have two mutable energies. Gemini is mutable air, and Pisces is mutable water. Mutable means it's changeable, it's malleable. There are no strict boundaries here. And so with Gemini specifically, it is very much about the two sides of every coin that you can consider when you have ideas. It is insatiable curiosity in Gemini. And so Venus here has been really loving this zone. She shows you what feels good to us in terms of our relationships and our resources. She really brings abundance to her. That is Venus's jam. And so she knows what she likes and she knows what she doesn't like. And in this Gemini space, she has been really, really showing us how we can enjoy and find comfort and security and harmony in this Gemini energy, because it's going to be really important that we understand this, over the next year and a half. I think we're really going to be collectively having to master this energy of the duality. And she's been showing us, how this translates into what feels good, into the relationships in our lives. So when this squares with Neptune, the thing about the late Gemini energy is that it starts to coalesce, because we're getting closer and closer to the Cancer energy. And the Cancer energy is what contains us emotionally. It's our root. We have to have an allegiance to a certain extent because it's a place we root into. We're making a commitment to a position when we get to Cancer. And the position could be just as simple as I hold space for myself at full emotional empowerment. But you have to hold a position in order to understand where you are emotionally secure. And as we get closer, as Venus gets closer to this point, it's going to, this insatiable curiosity and this consistent interaction with duality and ideas is going to start to coalesce. And this square is going to be this first kind of like, this is very tumultuous at 21 degrees. This is a labor demonstration. This is a protest that is pointing out the inequities, right? And it's going to be very obvious to us. It's going to feel disruptive in our relationships. It's going to feel disruptive to what is comfortable to us. This is not necessarily going to feel good. And it's going to be in square to this energy that's just like, have hope for a good future. And we're going to want to act out of this, I think, especially after this whole weekend and the first quarter square. And it's gonna be, we want to start acting on it. We want to start taking a position. It's going to start feeling good. We're going to start feeling it in our relationships. It's going to start coalescing, and Venus brings it to her. She doesn't have to do anything. It just all comes to her. That is the nature of the feminine, is receptiveness. And it's coming to us. And so this square by the end of the weekend is going to be like the crowning moment of the weekend, I think, because it's how Sunday ends, is that like this sense of inequity in our move towards, okay, it's finally time to start like taking a position in terms of what's actually around us, what feels good to us, what feels good to us. Venus is our relationships, it's our social life, you know, it's our connection, literally. What makes us feel good, and being with each other is what makes us feel good. And right now we've been considering all the ideas, and now we're closing in on this time where we've considered them all, and now we have to start interacting with the feeling of the opposition as we get that's why in Cancer you have to take a position, because you can't emotionally attach to things when they're constantly in opposition to each other. Eventually you take a position, um, and that's where Venus is headed. And as it starts to fire up a little bit and get conflicting mentally, this is that square to us that's just like, just have hope. You know, somebody accused me of having hopium earlier today, and that's definitely this degree. But it's not to say, and you know, Pisces and Neptune is very much about drugs and a drug addiction and changing your consciousness. So that is actually kind of apt. And I'm not suggesting that we should look at hope as a drug or not look at it as a drug. It's just, it's more about, there's a surrender to the process and a surrender to the experience itself of having hope. And we're going to really be challenged by the end of the weekend with this. I think that at the same time, it's going to lead to a really big breakthrough. There's just a lot of things shifting for people, and it's happening faster and faster and faster. And so these are the aspects that are going to most definitive, in my opinion, most definitively impact how this is all playing out for us individually and as a collective. So my sense of it is here, my friends, is that to remember the new moon, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, the connection between the divine and what's on earth. Remember that we're still in Taurus. Remember this with the square, the first quarter square, as we move into the second quarter of the lunar cycle, because we're going to then come to a full moon in Scorpio, right? Wow. There's a lot of hidden stuff that's going to come up to the surface to be seen with this full moon. And so right now we are getting our first real challenge to that commitment that we may have made with the new moon, to trust the process, trust the plan, trust nature, trust and get still and get to know ourselves. We might think we know everything about ourselves when we hit Leo. That's pretty normal because it's self-expression, but that's not the only aspect of who we are. And I think this is going to be the real challenge. How do we embrace that? How do we work with it? How do we move with our emotions and learn from them, as opposed to being like completely pulled along and be a victim to them? You know, how do we do that? That's different for everybody. But what I will say is that Mercury conjuncting Uranus, major downloads about this process of accepting the chaos as a part of everything, just as much as the balance, right? That is the balance. The opposition, accepting the opposition as part of the whole, just as much as you accept what you like, right? This is how we transmute, but it's a very passive experience in Taurus because we're just being ourselves. Big downloads. We got the moon that's going to oppose Mars in Aquarius, and on Friday, which is, again, where's the balance between you and what you want, your sovereign aspect of yourself, and where Mars is the champion of the people, essentially focusing on the collective and humanitarian aspect. And I can that's going to come to a head with this type of opposition. And then we move to the moon in Virgo. It's going to give us the opportunity to organize ourselves emotionally. It's going to trine all this Taurus energy. It's going to trine the Capricorn energy. It's really going to be supported by these huge shifts that are happening in order to organize ourselves. And then is really going to end with the Neptune energy that is the opposition from the moon, and then the square from Venus. And what, you know, our hope in a better future will be challenged in some way. And it's not to say that we should challenge it and not believe it. It's going to give us a chance to deepen it even more. And I think that's a great thing personally. And I think we actually need it coming into Beltane, and that we're going to really need it coming into the full moon in Scorpio, because that is going to be very revealing as far as I can tell. So I hope that this helped you. I hope it gave you a good sense of how to work with the energies of the weekend. I will still be on Facebook Live in the mornings for the daily medicine readings, so that will always build upon these things. Everything is in the description box below if you need some information. Readings are by donation at this point, so just reach out and let me know, and I put you on the list. It's about a week out, so that's not too bad. And I'm really glad you're here. I'm really grateful that you showed up for yourself. Thank you for supporting this channel. Definitely subscribe, and comments actually help the algorithm immensely. If you feel like this would be of value to other people, obviously go ahead and share it, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.